Shadows in the underground. The abandoned subway tunnel beneath 3rd Street hadn't seen a train in over 2 decades. But tonight, it hummed with a different kind of urgency. Dr. Marcus Rivera adjusted the surgical lamp that hung from rusted pipes, casting harsh shadows across makeshift operating tables. The air smelled of antiseptic and damp concrete, a combination that had become as familiar to him as his morning coffee. Patient coming in hot. Nora Blackwood's voice crackled through the encrypted radio.
Ow!
Her footsteps echoed down the metal stairs that led to their underground sanctuary. Marcus had met Nora 3 years ago when she'd been a paramedic burned out by bureaucracy and budget cuts. Now she was his eyes and ears in the world above, screening patients and ensuring their secrecy. The woman Nora half-carried into the clinic was barely conscious, her dark hair matted with blood and rain. A gunshot wound in her shoulder had soaked through multiple layers of clothing, and her breathing was shallow but steady. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't the injury he'd seen worse, but the way her fingers clutched a waterproof pouch, even in her semi-conscious state. Found her. 3 blocks from the cathedral, Nora said, helping transfer the patient to the operating table. She kept repeating coordinates and something about Project Nightingale. Delirious, probably, but she insisted on finding the shadow surgeon. Marcus frowned. That name had been whispered in certain circles, but he'd never used it himself. The fact that this woman knew to look for him suggested either remarkable street intelligence or something far more dangerous. He began cutting away her jacket, noting the quality of the fabric and the lack of identification. "Cassandra," the woman whispered, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. "My name is Cassandra Vale. They're going to kill everyone who knows." What? Marcus could respond. She'd slipped back into unconsciousness, worked quickly, his hands moving with the precision that had made him one of the city's most promising surgeons before he'd walked away from it all. The bullet had missed major arteries but had lodged near the clavicle. Routine, if he'd been in a proper hospital with proper equipment. "Nora, I need you to run interference topside," he said, not looking up from his work. "If someone shot her, and she made it to us, they might still be tracking." As Nora disappeared up the stairs, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. The woman's hands bore calluses consistent with extensive firearms training, and there was a small scar behind. Her ear, the kind left by surgical implants used in intelligence work. This wasn't just another desperate soul seeking help in the shadows. The waterproof pouch slipped from her grip as he worked, spilling encrypted drives and documents marked with government seals. Marcus's blood ran cold. In 3 years of operating in the underground, he'd treated gang members, abuse victims, and undocumented immigrants. But he'd never had a government agent bleeding out on his table. Cassandra Vale wasn't just running from criminals. She was running from something that had the resources and reach to make people disappear permanently. And now, by saving her life, Marcus Rivera had just made himself a target. The bullet came free with a soft clink against the metal tray. But Marcus knew that removing it was the easy part. The real surgery would be figuring out how to keep them all alive, bleeding secrets. The anesthesia began wearing off 3 hours after Marcus finished the surgery. Cassandra's eyes opened slowly, scanning the makeshift recovery room with the methodical precision of someone trained to assess threats. She tried to sit up, winced, and settled back against the pillow that Nora had fashioned from clean surgical towels. "Easy," Marcus said from his position at a small desk where he'd been reviewing her vital signs. "The shoulder will be tender for weeks, but you'll have full mobility if you don't tear the sutures." Cassandra's gaze fixed on the scattered contents of her pouch, now neatly arranged on a nearby tray. "You looked? I'm a doctor, not a saint. When someone shows up bleeding and carrying classified documents, I tend to want to know what I'm dealing with." Marcus pulled his chair closer to the bed. "Cassandra Vale, though I'm guessing that's not your real name. Former analyst with the Defense Intelligence Agency? Specialized in bioweapons assessment until 18 months ago." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. 18 months, 2 weeks. And 3 days ago. But who's counting? She attempted to sit up again, more successfully this time. "How much do you know about Meridian Corporation, pharmaceutical giant, military contracts? Headquarters downtown in the glass tower that looks like it was designed by someone who hates sunlight." Marcus kept his tone neutral, but internally he was connecting dots he didn't like. Why? Before Cassandra could answer, Nora's voice came through the radio with an urgency that made Marcus's stomach drop. Doc, we've got company. Black SUVs, 2 blocks out and moving in a search pattern. Professional grade. They've got thermal equipment. Marcus was already moving, gathering essential supplies into a go bag he kept packed for exactly this scenario. But Cassandra grabbed his wrist with surprising strength for someone who'd lost that much blood. They're not just looking for me, she said. 3 weeks ago, I stumbled onto evidence that Meridian has been conducting illegal human trials. Not just drugs, genetic modification experiments using stolen military bioweapon research. The test subjects are people who won't be missed. Homeless, undocumented, addicts. The pieces clicked together in Marcus's mind with horrifying clarity. People like the patients I treat down here? Exactly. Your underground clinic isn't just competition for legitimate hospitals, it's a recruitment ground. They've been tracking places like this, identifying vulnerable populations. Cassandra's eyes held a desperate intensity. Coordinate sigh. Was repeating when your partner found me? Their locations of other missing people, other clinics that have been compromised. Above ground, Detective Vincent Cross stood in the rain outside what used to be Murphy's bar, studying the thermal readings on his tablet. 23 years with the police force had taught him to recognize when a case was bigger than it appeared. The tip about an illegal medical operation should have been routine, but the federal agents who'd suddenly appeared and tried to take over his investigation suggested otherwise. Sir, we're getting heat signatures from the old subway access officer, Patricia Santos reported. At least 3 people, possibly more. Vincent made a decision that would change everything. Instead of calling in the federal team, he clicked his radio to a private channel. This is Cross. I'm going in for preliminary reconnaissance. Maintain perimeter, but do not engage without my direct order. Back in the tunnel, Marcus helped Cassandra to her feet. The documents she'd been carrying painted a picture that made his 3 years of underground work seem naive. Meridian wasn't just profiting from human suffering, they were manufacturing it, turning desperate people into test subjects for experiments that violated every principle of medical ethics. There's someone else, Cassandra said, as they prepared to evacuate through the tunnel's secondary exit. Agent Dakota Thorne, my former handler. She's the one who ordered my termination when I threatened to expose the project. But I think she's being manipulated by someone higher up the chain. The sound of footsteps echoing through the tunnel cut their conversation short. Marcus grabbed his medical bag while Nora began the practiced routine of destroying evidence, burning patient files, wiping down surfaces, preparing their emergency escape route through the old maintenance tunnels that connected to the sewer system. But as they reached the hidden exit, a voice called out from behind them. NYPD. I'm alone, and I'm not here to arrest anyone. Detective Vincent Cross stepped into the light, his weapon holstered and his hands visible. My name is Vincent Cross, and I think we all want the same thing: to stop some very dangerous people from hurting more innocent victims. Marcus looked at Cassandra, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Sometimes the only way to stay hidden in the shadows was to trust someone willing to step into them with you. The underground clinic was about to become the center of something much larger than any of them had imagined. The price of truth. Detective Vincent Cross had seen enough corruption in his career to recognize it from a mile away. But nothing had prepared him for the scope of what Cassandra revealed in the abandoned warehouse where they'd relocated. Documents spread across the makeshift table read like a horror novel written by scientists with government funding. Project Nightingale isn't just about drug trials, Cassandra explained, her wounded shoulder making her wince as she pointed to specific files. They're using genetic modification techniques developed for bioweapons to create enhanced soldiers. The problem is, 90% of subjects die within 6 months, and the survivors develop severe psychological disorders. Marcus studied photographs of test subjects, before and after images that made his medical training feel inadequate. These people were healthy when they started. Look at the muscle deterioration, the neurological symptoms. It's like they're being consumed from the inside. Vincent had been quietly making phone calls, using contacts he'd built over 2 decades of police work. What he'd learned made him wish he'd stayed ignorant. 3 of the locations Cassandra identified have been raided in the past month. Official reports claim drug busts, but no arrests were made. The people who ran those clinics have all disappeared. Because they're not arresting them, Cassandra said grimly. They're recruiting them. Forced participation in exchange for not prosecuting their illegal medical work. Dr. Helena Marsh, Meridian's head of research, was my mentor at the agency. She's brilliant enough to know exactly how to manipulate people's desperation. Nora, who had been monitoring police frequencies on a scanner, looked up with concern. We've got a problem. Multiple units are being dispatched to addresses connected to your old clinic. Doc, someone's moving fast to tie up loose ends. Before Marcus could respond, his encrypted phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We have Nora Blackwood. Meridian Research Facility, Sublevel 3. Come alone, or she joins the test subjects. RV, the blood drained from Marcus's face. They took her. Vincent leaned over to read the message. RV Roland Voss. I know that name. Ex-military, currently listed as security consultant for several major corporations. Word is, he runs the kind of operations that don't officially exist. Cassandra was already reaching for her jacket despite Marcus's protests about her injury. This is exactly what they want to draw us out, make us emotional, force us into making mistakes. Voss specializes in psychological manipulation. Then we give him what he wants, Marcus said, his voice carrying a determination that surprised even him, but not the way he expects. 20 minutes later, they stood outside the gleaming Meridian Tower, its glass facade reflecting the city lights like a beacon of technological progress. The building's public face housed legitimate pharmaceutical research. But Cassandra's intelligence indicated that the real work happened in sublevels that didn't appear on any official blueprint. The ventilation system connects to the old subway. Tunnels, Vincent said, studying building schematics he'd obtained through channels he preferred not to explain. If we can get into the basement level, there's a service elevator that goes down to the research floors. Inside the facility, Nora found herself strapped to a medical chair in a room that looked disturbingly similar to Marcus's underground clinic. Except everything here was sterile, modern. Dr. Helena Marsh stood nearby, reviewing a tablet with the casual indifference of someone ordering lunch. Ms. Blackwood, your friend Dr. Rivera, has been quite resourceful these past 3 years. We've actually been using his patient database to identify suitable test subjects. Marsh looked up with a smile that never reached her eyes. It's been remarkably efficient. Roland Voss entered the room carrying a syringe filled with an iridescent blue liquid. The serum works faster on subjects with medical training. Something about understanding what's happening to their bodies accelerates the psychological breakdown. Above them, Marcus, Cassandra, and Vincent had successfully infiltrated the building and were making their way through service corridors that reeked of chemical disinfectant. The facility's security was impressive but designed to keep people out, not to stop someone who understood how hospitals worked. There, Cassandra whispered, pointing to a reinforced door marked with biohazard. Warnings. Sublevel 3. As they prepared to breach the research floor, Marcus realized that everything he'd built in his underground clinic had been a lie. He hadn't been saving people, he'd been feeding them to monsters. The weight of that knowledge threatened to crush him, but Nora's life depended on him channeling that guilt into action. The real surgery was about to begin, and this time he wouldn't be working in the shadows. When they walked through that door, there would be no going back to the comfortable anonymity of his underground world. Dr. Helena Marsh was about to learn that some secrets, once exposed to light, became impossible to contain. Into the light. Sublevel Research Facility was a maze of sterile corridors and reinforced glass chambers, each containing evidence of experiments that violated every medical oath Marcus had ever taken. Through observation windows, he could see subjects in various stages of genetic modifications, some barely recognizable as human. Others sitting catatonic in corners of their cells. Jesus, Vincent whispered, his detective's composure cracking, as he witnessed horrors that belonged in history books, not modern laboratories. How long has this been going on? Cassandra moved with practiced stealth despite her injury. leading them through security blind spots she'd memorized during her time with the agency. 18 months in this facility, but the research goes back 5 years, Marsha's been perfecting. The process using homeless populations in 12 major cities. They found Nora in Research Lab C, unconscious but alive, still strapped to the examination chair. Roland Voss stood nearby, preparing another dose of the blue serum, while Dr. Helena, Marsh observed from behind a protective barrier. Predictable as always, Adrian, Marsh said without turning around. She'd somehow known they were coming, though I admit, bringing Detective Cross was cleverer than I expected. Too bad it won't matter. Marcus stepped into the lab, his hands raised but his voice steady. Let her go, Helena. Your quarrel is with me. My quarrel is with naive idealists who think medicine should be about healing rather than advancing human evolution. Marsh finally turned, revealing a face that had once mentored Cassandra, now twisted by years of justifying the unjustifiable. Do you know what your little underground clinic really was? A screening facility? You've been monitoring your patients for 3 years, identifying the ones with useful genetic markers. Vincent kept his weapon trained on Voss while scanning the room for tactical advantages. The facility was designed like a fortress, but it had one weakness: everything was connected to the building's central computer system, including the security. Cameras that were currently recording their conversation. Cassandra understood first. You're broadcasting this, aren't you? To every major news outlet, government oversight committee, and medical board in the country, Vincent confirmed. Whatever happens here, it's going to be very public. Marsh's confidence wavered for the first time. You're bluffing. You were broadcasting. We have people in position to contain any leaks? Not anymore, Cassandra said, pulling out a device that looked like a modified smartphone. While you were gloating, I've been uploading everything: patient files, research data, financial records, communication logs. Agent Dakota Thorne isn't working for you anymore. She's been feeding information to federal investigators for the past month. The revelation hit Marsh like a physical blow. It's impossible. Dakota terminated you herself. She faked my death to get me out safely and give me time to gather evidence. The bullet wound was real had to be, to fool your people, but Dakota made sure I knew where to find help. Cassandra nodded toward Marcus. Your surveillance of his clinic worked both ways. Roland Voss, realizing the situation was deteriorating rapidly, reached for his sidearm. Vincent moved faster, years of police training taking over as he tackled the larger man. They crashed into a bank of monitoring equipment, alarms blaring as critical systems went offline. Marcus used the chaos to reach Nora, quickly checking her vital signs while releasing her restraints. She was conscious but groggy, the serum having been administered but not yet taking full effect. Can you walk? I can run if I have to, Nora replied, though her voice was shaky. Did they hurt anyone else? Through the facility's intercom system, Dr. Helena Marsh's voice echoed with desperate authority. Security to all levels. We have a containment breach. Initiate lockdown protocol. Instead of security teams, federal agents began streaming through the facility's main entrance. Agent Dakota Thorne led the charge, her credentials finally giving her the authority to act on months of carefully gathered intelligence. It's over, Helena, Cassandra said, as they helped Nora to her feet. Meridian Corp's board of directors received copies of everything an hour ago. Your funding has been frozen, your research contracts canceled, and about 40 federal prosecutors are currently fighting over who gets to file charges first. The surgeon's gambit 6 months later. Marcus stood before an audience of 2,000 medical professionals at the International Conference on Medical Ethics, the largest gathering of doctors, researchers, and healthcare administrators in the world. The irony wasn't lost on him, the man who had spent 3 years hiding in subway tunnels was about to deliver the keynote address that would reshape modern medicine's approach to vulnerable populations. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the convention center. I want to tell you about a patient named Maria Santos. She was undocumented, uninsured, and dying of a treatable heart condition. 3 years ago, I operated on her in an abandoned subway tunnel because it was the only place she could receive care without fear of deportation. The audience was silent, captivated by the story they'd read about in newspapers but never heard from the source. Behind Marcus, a large screen displayed before and after photos of Meridian's test subjects, alongside images of the underground clinic where he'd unknowingly been feeding victims to predators. What I didn't know, Marcus continued, was that by helping Maria, I was also helping Dr. Helena Marsh identify her as a potential test subject for illegal genetic modification experiments. In the audience, Cassandra Vale, now using her real name, Agent Sarah Chun, watched with quiet satisfaction. The trial of Dr. Helena Marsh had concluded 2 weeks earlier with a conviction on 47 counts of human experimentation and conspiracy. Meridian Corporation had been dissolved, its assets liquidated to compensate victims and fund legitimate medical research. Detective Vincent Cross, recently promoted to captain, sat in the second row. The Meridian investigation had earned him commendations from federal agencies and a task force assignment to investigate medical crimes. More importantly, it had restored his faith in the possibility that the system could still work when good people refused to stay silent. The question we face today, Marcus said, advancing to his next slide, is not whether we should help the most vulnerable members of our society. The question is how we create systems that protect them from exploitation while ensuring they receive the care they need. Roland Voss had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, but his network of security consultants had scattered to corporations around the world. The fight against medical exploitation was far from over, but at least now it was being fought in the open. Nora Blackwood, fully recovered from her ordeal but forever changed by it, had started a non-profit organization called The Underground Network, a legitimate version of what Marcus had tried to create in the shadows. They operated mobile clinics that provided free healthcare to undocumented immigrants, homeless individuals, and others who couldn't access traditional medical services. Today, I'm announcing the establishment of the Shadow Clinic Foundation, Marcus said, his presentation reaching its climax. Funded by the settlement from Meridian Corporation, we will create a network of free clinics specifically designed to serve populations that have historically been exploited by unethical research. The audience erupted in applause, but Marcus raised his hand for silence. He had one more revelation. Agent Dakota Thorne, who many of you know as the whistleblower who exposed Project Nightingale, will be joining me as the Foundation's Director of Patient Advocacy. He gestured to a woman in the front row who stood and nodded to the crowd. Together, we're going to prove that medicine works best when it's practiced in the light. After the presentation, Marcus found himself in a quiet corner of the convention center with his original team. Nora was reviewing applications from doctors who wanted to join their network. Vincent was coordinating with international law enforcement agencies to track down other facilities that might be conducting similar experiments. Cassandra Sorrow was preparing for her next assignment with a new federal task force dedicated to medical crimes. You know, Sarah said, when I first stumbled into your clinic with that bullet wound, I never imagined it would lead to all this. Marcus looked out the window at the city below, thinking about all the people in shadows who still needed help. 3 years ago, I thought I was saving lives by working in secret. Now I know the real surgery was always going to be performed in public, with witnesses, and with accountability. Nora closed her laptop and joined their conversation. The first Shadow Clinic opens next month in Detroit. We've got 17 more planned for the next 2 years, and about 300 doctors who volunteered to staff them. Vincent's phone buzzed with a message that made him smile. Just got word from Interpol. They've identified 12 facilities in 6 countries using Meridian's research methods. The investigation is going international. As the sun set over the convention center, Marcus realized that his real calling had never been to hide from the world's problems, but to illuminate them. The underground clinic had been necessary, but it had also been temporarily a bridge between a broken system and something better. Dr. Helena had been right about one thing. Medicine was about advancing human evolution, but she'd been wrong about the method. Real advancement came not from experimenting on the vulnerable, but from protecting them, healing them, and giving them the tools to heal others. The shadow surgeon had stepped permanently into the light, and he was never going back.